This is Stonehenge. What's fascinating about it is that it's a modern interpretation of a site that did not look like this when it was originally built. Just like all of our ancient history, it is an interpretation by modern archaeologists with the influence of Victorian archaeologists. And although there's a lot of great conversations and a lot of light, a renaissance in archaeology, in information about our ancient past, we have been so embedded because of Victorian archaeology to believe that we are the most advanced we ever were. We miss high-tech ancient human works. It's dismissed. Cranes are it. These nubs at the top of these posts are examples of engineering way beyond what it would take to build this structure. But that's how it's left. That's what we're left as a narrative, that we are as advanced as we've ever been, and that's not true. That's what we're going to be discussing. Ancient advanced engineering right down to the soil, terraforming a planet, genetics, information that is so beyond what's currently been dialogued that none of these Victorian archaeologists even had on their radar. It was outside of their belief system. They were interpreting it with a Western eye in a system that did not allow for us to be more advanced than we were today, other than loincloths. But that's not true. These ancient lost sites were abandoned. They were reused. And it was easy to dismiss the advanced technology right before our eyes. It just wasn't true. So work has continued to not only uncover our past, but unfortunately restore it to an idea, not the facts that were in the ground. Unfortunately, we've populated the Earth to the point currently where we live with the advanced tidbits and we ignore them. Or unfortunately, they're hidden every time something's, in quotes, restored. But we're going to break it down right now, and we're going to talk about the very advanced indications of advanced engineering, terraforming a planet on a scale that has not been considered, which will help turn our narrative as to our advanced ancient past and how complex it really was.
When you look at the sheer scale and size of these huge blocks of stone, the expert cuts, these people that have gone before our society, way gone, had a far better understanding of mathematics, engineering and geometry.
This is Baalbek. What we're looking at are the bottoms of columns. The columns are now in the wall. This is a one-time build. This is a classic story of archaeology. Only one group of people built this, in quotes, temple. Why is there a base to a diorite column? How is it that the original society that was building 60-foot columns, moving 1,200-ton stones, would give up and throw a column in their wall? This is just absurd.
Possibly thousands of years after the disappearance of the society which was responsible for this great architecture, other societies and civilizations have tried to emulate that which they happened upon, but failed, as you can see, miserably.
I mean, that's the joke of this right now, as you look at this advanced engineering right here. What else could be behind the societies that came along and mimicked what they found? What is the game changer? Engineered soil is where it's at. This is a soil that is great for growing food to 100 times greater than just about anything we've ever created. It can filter heavy metals. It can filter carbon dioxide. It does piezoelectric, electrical transmissions, and more importantly, it's all over the earth. It's artificial. It's in South America, Central America, Northern Africa, Europe, and it's all the way over in Australia. Now, taken alone, that's an anomaly. But this is a massive amount of engineering that matches. It's not only identical in many cases, it's all over the earth in areas that were considered nomadic. That is outside of the paradigm of the world that we've been explained was separate societies not working together. Yet all over the earth, common talk is polygonal masonry, which has frequencies and cymatics involved in order to manage earthquakes. These small angular moves in the stone cuts aren't just for looks or because they had to find rocks to fit each section. These are very specific designs. Now, with a piezoelectric engineered soil, what are they really managing down to these buildings' foundations, like at Sacsayhuaman? What is it that no one has been studying in the history of ancient history? Cymatics, polygonal construction, working with frequencies and waves in order to stop not only earthquakes, but to send and manage signals to and from buildings. That means that these angular spaces in this construction.
Now, what really gets me is when people throw up their arms and say, well, these people only had copper tools or bronze chisels. They were very pious and they used ropes and logs. Oh, and slaves. How about this old cookie? It was aliens. No, now that is truly ridiculous.
We are looking at an amphitheater for Greek and Roman design that manages earthquakes and frequencies. Modern scientists have seen that this is what these foundations are doing. That is a high level of complexity, way beyond measuring whether or not there will be an earthquake. This is high technology, human technology, cymatic technology managing seismic metastructures, nano-sized particles to giant stone spheres that manage the directions of frequencies and waves hitting a building. They're doing it in the soil. They're managing not just the structure itself, as the rush to find mummies is, the foundation outside of the walls. The soil itself has been compacted and managed and engineered.
This is Baalbek, the temple of Jupiter in the Lebanon. Some of its base stones are over 1,000 tons in weight.
This is a perfect example. Management of compacted soil or sifted and brought in to manage the frequencies and energies necessary for a building to be constructed. That's incredible work. There are many infinite signals that would be managed. To manage frequencies which are infinite for construction and to do it over the course of a planetary-wide society, you're going to have to manage not only the effects on a single entity, a single building, you're going to have to manage what's underground. That's where stone spheres come in. Polygonal construction comes in. And that's where keystone cuts that are also found, like everything, all over the earth, like the Nazca lines. These are geocircuits. There are indications that they have piezoelectric properties. Eric von Daniken himself speaks of those in the testing they've done. Cymatics, frequency and energy work, is something on one hand that's incorporated from weapons technology to medicine, but we are barely on the cutting edge of understanding it. Engineered soil, having already incorporated these abilities all over the earth with cymatic metastructures like stone spheres that could actually, placed well, manage earthquakes under whole cities. Nanostructures and nano and DNA archaeology and sedimentary testing is new. Applying all of it to the structures outside of a Greek and Roman amphitheater, it's already been noticed, like in Bologna, Italy, that safe zones through towered structures would be here. They would be managed and they would work to stop earthquakes. Compacting the soils, looking at not just the structures themselves and where the mummies and the gold and the jewelry might be, but actually looking at an entire complex outside of it may give us an indication of how complex and advanced the truly advanced ancient society was. This society was managing the earth outside of the cities themselves. The more we look at that and not just go for the gold and the jewelry and try to rebuild the structure itself, we're going to have information about a society that's just outside of just their junk and their archaeological waste. It's mind-blowing to consider that this is a society that was managing over such a great, vast amount of land that outside of these structures we're looking at, the soil itself is part of the structure. This isn't something that's been considered. It's not on the radar, which makes ramps and slaves all the more palatable. This is where we're stuck. And it's the most exciting revelation. It's a revolution in our past to not just go for the gold, which has been a distraction and an exciting part of our past. It's really neat to have found King Tut, but that's not the only thing we're here to find. We're here to know the who, what, where, when, and why of our ancient history. And these dynastic peoples did not build these giant megalithic structures with cobblestone in between them because they gave up on building complex constructions and polygonal walls. The people who built this small little rubble section are not the people who built the giant engineered building.
When you look at modern construction, you can look back and see that polygonal construction would not end with river rock on top of a wall. Modern construction is a good example, but when you think of polygonal masonry and the complexities of cymatic and energy and frequency work, which is what all these zigzags and cuts represent, for earthquake control, that's just our entry level. That's not the only thing that they would be managing because of engineered soil.
To understand our advanced past, we have to look at modern construction. This is a concrete form for a large complex. This is the wood structure above it. And this is the completed project. What would that look like in 10,000 years? Well, we have to start at the foundation. And that puts us at a single-family home. A foundation's built to build the house. The ground is tamped, and then you get ready to pour a wall. In order to do that, you need class 5 gravel, you need soil, you need to pre-compact it before you put down this concrete foundation, which is normal. Then there's exterior insulations now. We've got it down, but when we build, we use consistent construction methods like these sheetrocks. It's the same building material. We don't vary the construction. And if you're working in stone, you don't throw rubble in a polygonal wall. But after thousands of years, what would you have left? You'd have these columns. Rain, snow, mold, fire, this is what would be left, columns. And that's if the columns were still sitting where the original structure was when they built it. It's quite possible that the construction was left abandoned and then moved to a new location.
How about Stonehenge? Compared to Baalbek, the stones are relatively small, at weighing the largest 50 tons. But they came from a quarry 186 miles away in Wales. Now, to me, bringing those stones through marshland and wood and dragging them on logs and ropes is a far more bigger accomplishment than building the henge in itself.
This is Göbekli Tepe, and what you're looking at are large megalithic columns with rubble between them. And we're told that this is an occupation of the same group of people, that whoever built this, they could build large carved columns, yet they finished it with rubble, that there wasn't multiple occupations of people that couldn't work with large columns, that it was a single group of people that built this. Well, that's problematic because we see large megalithic structures like those bottoms of columns being incorporated into walls like at Baalbek. That is not how you build anything. You have to know nothing about construction to believe that. All over the world, there is massive amounts of land, like here in this image, underwater that was occupied by man. They came along after sites were abandoned and reused. Engineered soil is way outside of the wheelhouse of primitive people. New techniques are going to need to be used.
Okay, this is amazing. It's not about who's missed it. It's about an advanced ancient human race. It's not aliens. It's not that there couldn't be aliens. But we have to focus now on core sampling. Core sampling under foundations gives us this level of indication of how compacted is the soil. There are structures like the Great Pyramid at Giza that we think are on a solid surface. But if you're moving 1,200 to 3,000 ton stones with no effort, how hard is it to pre-compact a soil to 100%? How hard is it to mix that soil into a substrate that you think would be more not only solid, but would communicate better with other engineered soils? These are the elephants in the room when people start talking about aliens, and it's not that there couldn't be. We have to focus back with the facts that are on the table, not the theories we want to promote, but the facts. And sedimentary DNA sampling, which is here now, which has helped us identify Denisovan, where we didn't know there was going to be a Denisovan, along with, we're talking atom, crystal-sized, nano-sized particles. That's all we need now. And they're identifying flora and fauna from Doggerland. And that's incredible, but it means that with engineered soils, are they just for growing? Are they for piezoelectric? Are they just terra pretas? Or are they crystalline, layered, compacted for the purpose of seismic engineering, for communication engineering, and for purposes that we're not even aware of, to connect these cities, not just single buildings, and not just to other cities, but where do our genetics fall within it? So right now, unbeknownst to all of us, we've been scratching our head at, boy, these polygonal patterns are so zigzaggy, and we know they have to do with earthquake control, but they're not just cutting this polygonal masonry to match a particular area and their earthquakes, they're also having to put them on solid foundations. And this is a very missed understanding. Anthropologists are not engineers, architects, they're not builders. And so you have this societal interpretation that could almost be true for the last couple thousand or 6,000 years. But the weathering on these stones, the indications of great antiquity are here. And it's not just South America or Egypt or Asia or South Asia or Japan. It's in these underwater zones that are proving to have ruins that may have been untouched since pre-Younger Dryas. That's optimistic. But right now, to focus on this core sampling, to actually get core sampling to indicate what is the seismic metamaterials they used, how many different kinds of crushed fill-in-the-blank crystal or silicrete or concrete or an element that isn't even local, so we get excited about the quarries of where these stones come from, but the complexity of the machinery that not only carried them and cut them, but placed them and did it in a pattern that managed frequencies and energies. Wouldn't also that be true that they would be, of course, used for the foundations? And not just under the buildings, but outside of the buildings, across an entire field. There could be housing, stone spheres. Many elements would be pulled together to not only manage that, but connect genetically.
Now imagine doing core sampling all over the Earth. At every site outside of the actual area of a construction. Devices like this are going to have to be brought. It's a lot of different kinds of drilling equipment that are going to give us the core samples at the depths that we're going to need to show non-dynastic use. Use that's only been in the last 6,000 years may not be the original construction. And that is a problem. We have to get to the engineered soils, the seismic metamaterials that built these original advanced ancient structures, not the graffiti that was done by people in the last couple thousand years. Nanostructures are where we're going to find our answers. Some, like this dynastic work on top of ancient advanced megalithic work. Similar constructions all over indicate cymatic use, and the size and shape of these objects have never been studied. They're all over, including New Zealand here. Composite materials, silicretes, concretes, advanced seismic metastructures, bays like this one that have Teflon-like finishes that are ancient and advanced. These rebuilds by dynastic peoples are interesting. All work should be respected for its history, for its rich human heritages and survivals, but we can't look at this and say that these are the same groups of people that built this wall and the megalithic construction above it. It's just crazy to constantly look at similar polygonal walls and shapes at the lowest levels, like here in Egypt, The silicrates, concretes, seismic metamaterials, nanostructures, there are remnants all over the earth. Even as we build, we're digging up megalithic work. Like here, where it's been dynastically reassociated with the Japanese. This palace is not what was here originally.
Okay, you can see under these Japanese temple, castle, you can see the polygonal walls. There's something more complex.
The savannas of South Africa have terra preta, the engineered soil, and ruins of a society that no one's ever looked at. All over the earth are opportunities to create a new snapshot of ancient advanced machining and work. And core sampling is going to have to be one of the evasive techniques that is going to have to be used, but perhaps not under the structure itself. Up to and near it, it's not just the foundational columns that are creating the seismic metamaterials and the support, or the safe zones within ancient metropolises. The cymatics and frequencies being used, we're going to be able to measure from these polygonal walls. The shapes themselves are indicating particular frequencies were being managed to make sure buildings like this did not fall over. Stone spheres, the waves might be invisible, but the remnant constructions, like what we're seeing here between modern construction, technology, and the past, these people were actually digitizing the planet in a way we don't comprehend.
I'm not denying the existence, the very high probability, in fact, that extraterrestrials may well have visited this planet, presently and in the past. But to credit them with the building that we find around us thousands of years ago would be to close the book on probability and to do humanity a disservice.
You really have to consider that this is not how people build, and anthropologists are not engineers. You can do it as a hobby, but you really need to look at the constructions and then compare them to these methods, these crude methods to drag these statues around.
Let's look at modern archaeology's interpretation about giant 1,000, 2,000 ton statues. You need a lot of people on a sled with some sand and water, maybe some grease, lard, and you just gotta pull it somewhere. This is the explanation for advanced ancient machinery. There was none. And modern construction manages these megaliths and interprets that this is where they go, this is what they look like, not that they're extremely weathered, highly advanced columns.
One of the biggest problems with what's going on in archaeology is not acknowledging the out of place, out of time artifacts. There are so many that they just don't put them on the table because they say, hey, well, it's a one-off. Well, not when you put them all together.
This is a Clerkstar Sphere. It's 2.5 to 3.5 billion years old, man-made. Footprints, solidified. Couple million, 5 million, 10 million, or even older, like this, even studied by the Rockefeller Foundation, a 120 plus million year old footprint with boot stitching. This is a massive elephant in the room about human antiquity and the stories we tell ourselves about the age of humanity. It's supposed to have started with these people. Biblical folk. Christian Western archaeology is a lot of the rudimentary elements to our understanding of history. That's a problem. Clerkstar is a space in Africa. These spheres shouldn't exist. Everything was started in dynastic times. Sleds and ropes, enlightenment, as we forgot about those things. Moving into modern times, how do you explain looking at modern construction and these megalithic blocks with nothing but rubble around them as being the same group of people? They were just too busy, too tired from pulling all these sleds to finish off the building with more advanced polygonal construction in the middle. This doesn't add up. DNA is another animal. This is Pumapunku as it was in the late 1800s. Very strange and very advanced ruins that has magnetic features, which are also something, along with other cymatics, frequencies, wave, and energy use, along with the engineered soil that no one's really looking at. These guys seem to be the responsible party. The Paracas were some of the oldest mummies on Earth, dating to almost 9,000 years old, with cranial capacities and a natural formation. Not cranial deformation, but this is their natural head. And they're not just from Paracas, Peru. They're found all over the Earth. Elongated skulls don't have the suture lines that this normal human head does. They have one, like this. These guys were managing these constructions and living simultaneously, genetically, with what is turning out to be a much more diverse human race all over the world. And Ollantaytambo here doesn't show indications that it was one societal occupation. With these details, advanced, extremely detailed constructions do not indicate copper tools or diorite balls. This is very advanced construction.
So theoretically, Pumapunku, Tiwanaku, great sites to look at, because this is a perfect example of what's going on today. After over 100 years, they've done no further research than a few feet down, because you can't keep finding precision architecture from an advanced ancient human population and say that you got history right or antiquity. It had to have been aliens, because that's the only reasonable conclusion you could make after not digging.
Here's Pumapunku again as it was before archaeologists got a hold of it. But the locals had taken a lot of stones away and quarried them, which continued even in dynastic Egypt and in modern times were used for people's homes or churches or modern buildings. Here it is today. Doesn't look too different. But they say there's nothing to find. That's right. There's nothing and any need to dig further down because they've sorted all out what this is. The problem is every single piece you're looking at is so advanced and beyond what should be there. If they keep digging, they're going to keep coming up with more materials that don't work. These are dynastic Egyptian columns. They're built in 4-foot sections. Fairly easy to do, but beautiful and stunning. It's easy to understand why people get distracted by the beauty of dynastic people's works. It's beautiful, but it's achievable. But here's Baalbek. Those are 60-foot columns, diorite, some of the hardest stone on Earth. Like the guy laying on that column and those column sections, they're sections. But the work at Baalbek indicates multiple generational dynastic use. The giant 60-foot diorite columns came from Aswan and other locations off of single machines. So what else do archaeologists do that kind of slow down our perception time changes? Look at this location. This is in the 1850s. You wouldn't imagine that 130 plus years later it would look like this, give or take. But that's the snail's trail of modern archaeology. It's not treated as a search and rescue. It's just a search and rescue would be amazing, but it's a search and recovery. That's why it's taking over 100 years to get to these stories. We're starting with what could be massive amounts of genetic and DNA and sedimentary DNA information, but they're clearing that away, which would be wonderful dynastic information to get down to these buildings, which in frequent cases like this one at Baalbek have been restacked. Look at all the different rubble layers. This is not a single wall from a single society. This is adaptation and rebuilding through years and years and years of abandonment. Same thing here at the Osirian in Egypt. The lower you go, the more advanced it gets.
So this is a problem. The lower you go, the more advanced you find. So that's not how societies work, and we keep pointing it out, but we're not going far enough. It's the soils that either are part of the foundations of these structures themselves. The core sampling required in order to look at them still needs to be done, but it's also the construction methods. So we've never reproduced how they cut. We've had really poor shows on it, but we need to look at modern construction.
Modern stone cutting is fascinating. This is a wheel that's 100 years old. It was built in Italy. It's made from a metal that has diamond tips here in order to cut through the stone. It's very thick. It's nothing like advanced ancient quarrying. But these are modern examples of what we do today to cut blocks, to then refine them into your bathroom floors or your living room, tile jobs. But these constructions of the ancient past incorporate cymatics, frequencies, energies. Frank Lloyd Wright's Japanese hotel did not fall during earthquakes. Forgotten methods of energy management are embedded into even medieval structures. Legends have turned into patterns that turned into just customs, no technology. The story we wrote then about our history was one of sheer brute force. And then to try to see if we couldn't do it and call it a day, but druids and modern peoples have forgotten, beyond ignored, just don't acknowledge the technologies they're sitting on. Silicretes being found today are so advanced, the people that have had no genetic testing, their dissimilarities are screaming at us, and not a single institution will do anything.
How much of this is actual biotech? Are we looking at advanced ancient programming that helped plug us into the planet?
DNA is the issue. No one wants to test the elephant in the room, let alone acknowledge that the coastlines for the society would not be where they are today. And these similar personalities in cymatic constructions from Peru to Egypt to Cambodia include synesthesias, which is the ability to mix colors, words, numbers, geometries. Genetics is where it's at. Whether it's the Paracas of Peru, elongated skulls, synesthesias like this, to us on the left, wouldn't be able to distinguish the actual changes in the green and the red on the right. But people with synesthesias can, and we assume it's a genetic anomaly. But imagine a color and a number being identical, or no number, that 5 plus 2 is yellow. How easy would it be for you to cut a polygonal shape that goes in a cymatically built wall? It would be very different for people of a cranial capacity way beyond ours. Are they alien or are they us? And could they cut this by just seeing what they needed to cut in their mind's eye because of frequencies? The technologies associated would be biotechnologies that would be associated with the human body. You wouldn't go from a rubble section to extremely complicated polygonal walls that manage frequencies if you didn't have a mind's eye for it, a built-in biotechnology that allowed you to communicate from ancient engineered soils to the very material evidence work that you were doing. You wouldn't need a tape measure. This work wouldn't require that. It would require your mind's eye to see with synesthesia abilities. Colors would be your numbers, and shaving them and precision work could be as simple as you throwing on your best music. And as far as underground, these stone spheres, no material testing. No one's looked at them. They have been told to be just concretions. The frequencies and energy research as late as 2019, just a couple years ago, are showing that's not the case. These stone spheres are all over the earth, and they indicate cymatic metamaterial sciences, and they need to be researched. Low-hanging fruit. How hard would it be to go from a circle or orange or marshmallow and into Ollantaytambo Tambo or Sacsayhuaman? And we have a lot of soil and a lot of acres that we can core sample, and we can ignore some of the graffitis and recreate Nazca lines. Look at maybe what they were. Antennas, microscopes, satellite microscopes. The societies that were using and building these structures originally had something very different in mind than the rubble we see here in these photos. Acknowledging that this isn't the same society anymore isn't enough. This has to be a search and rescue to line and make our genetics match the technology that lay dormant. Right now, we're just considering it as an anomaly. But abilities like synesthesias are much more complex.
They're moving not only Earth and constructions, but they're programming their genes. They're plugging their cities and their natural environment into their genetics. So are we really looking at synesthesias and these ancient humans as just one piece of a biotechnology we don't understand in what is really a search and rescue? Because we're calling some people right now superhuman. Aren't we really talking about a lot of undiscovered abilities that are represented in the technologies that we're finding? I mean, we're clearly seeing indications of a society that programmed in biotech as much as they did in physical external technology.
There are 3,000-ton megalithic blocks. Besides the matching polygonal work all over the Earth, in reference to this high energy and frequency technology, we have the facts of the engineered soils in the ground working to manage cities that have been wiped out, demolished, and removed, but not the nanostructures. There's no going around it, they have to still be there. And we have a lot of land that's underwater that we haven't looked at. What if we had a city that no one's been able to mutate or touch or rebuild? Here in Cuba, off the coast, while looking for Spanish galleons, this city off the coast of Cuba could not have been above water less than 50,000 years ago, which means the engineered soils, the seismic metamaterials, the original constructions of this pyramid, if it's not tectonic plate shifting, is still intact. Core samples like the Flinders Petrie Core 7 and genetics, they're still lying in front of us with the Paracas and other elongated skulls. They just have to be tested. And places like Ollantaytambo can get the credit for what they really are. Deconstruction and continued archaeological work will get us into the deep. We will be able to see our past clearly, and the cymatics and energy work that was done will be clear even with core sampling work to show the compactions of soils or the additives in soils through nano cymatic materials. Or the Dynastic work will also contain broken up blocks of existing abandoned ancient high technology. But right now we think it's just a matter of stone coring. The societies that built this were operating under a much higher level of technology, like this 8-sided pyramid on the Giza Plateau. We just have to start with where we're at with the most advanced information and stop digressing into other very really out there theories. It's not that there aren't aliens, but you have to ignore the advanced human technology in front of us to go there first.